Let's make Dolphin great again. Hey, what's happening, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Quest for the Couch, the show where we build a computer that's designed to fit under a TV space. We build it up, we add upgrades to it, and we show off all kinds of accessories that you can be using to improve your home media PC experience. So the original intent of the series was to build a PC that can run Dolphin and a lot of local multiplayer games, but it's kind of ballooned to a point where it's basically a secondary PC. It's quite powerful now with an R9 380 and Intel 4690K, but I want to bring it back to its roots. I want to look at some accessories that you can use for certain emulators, this time in particular, Dolphin. Now, for those of you who don't know, Dolphin is a GameCube and Wii emulator, and it can also play a couple other games that are found through the Wii Virtual Console. But essentially, you can play GameCube and Wii games, fully fledged titles, on your PC. There are a couple issues for some games, some are more unplayable than others, but generally speaking, 90% of the time, it's a really genuinely good experience to play it on the emulator. Basically, what I want to show off today is the ultimate Dolphin emulator starter pack. So I want to preface by saying this, you don't generally need everything in this video. In fact, I'll show you right now the bare essentials that you might need if you want to play all these games. So for starters, simple Xbox 360 controller right here, wired, 30 bucks, pretty cheap to start with. You can bind the controls on this thing to work with Dolphin, so you just need to set it up so it'll work like a GameCube controller. As long as it has analog triggers, you'll be fine with the majority of GameCube titles. Now, for the general majority of Wii games, it really depends on what you want to play. There are a couple ways of doing it without spending money to buy all the needed accessories. For example, if you want to play a game that just doesn't support GameCube controllers, or something like the Xbox controller where you need to have motion controls, but all you really need is just to have the Wiimote sideways and waggle it and shake it from time to time like Donkey Kong Country. Well, all you really need is a Wiimote and a Bluetooth adapter for your PC. Nothing too serious. It's pretty easy to sync up with the Dolphin emulator, and yeah, it's pretty much plug in and play at that point. If you want to play the general majority of games that allow you to point, well, you're going to need a sensor bar. This is the Dolphin bar. I'll have talk about that a little bit more later. But that generally works pretty well. It's recognized by Dolphin, and it's nice for about 20 bucks. Now, of course, if you want to play games that require the nunchuck or the Wii Motion Plus, you're going to need to have a controller built with Wii Motion Plus, or use the adapter that you can find. You can get Wii Motion Plus Wiimotes somewhat cheaply if you buy new, about between $20 to $30, even though that is kind of old technology, and they shouldn't still be charging that much for it. But you can find a lot of Wiimotes really cheap used, like probably under 10 bucks in most cases, and you can buy those adapters fairly easily. It's not like they're rare or anything. So for the general majority of games, if you want a decent experience, about 40 to 50 bucks will do you well. But we're not here for that, are we? No, no, no. We're here because we want the best experience money can buy. Alright, so let's have a look at some GameCube first-party stuff. Now you might be thinking, well, if it's first party, I'm going to have to buy it used, right? And no, that's one of the great things. Almost everything on this table right now, you can buy it new, so you don't have to track down original controllers that probably don't work. Everything here will work as intended, most likely. Let's start out with the middle one here. This is the GameCube controller that was made for Smash 4. Basically, Nintendo realized that there aren't a lot of GameCube controllers left out there that are in good condition, to say the least, so they decided to repackage them. Actually, more like remake them, because it's not exactly the same mold. So there are a couple minute differences, but generally speaking, it's about the same. It's about the same shape, same size. Buttons feel a little bit different, but generally speaking, they're almost identical unless you've played a lot of GameCube games. You're not really going to tell the difference. It even uses the original plug, so it's compatible with the GameCube. And on top of that too, it's only 25 to 30 bucks, which is kind of nice. So I've actually been stockpiling these in case they run out and they just don't sell them anymore. You might be thinking that the GameCube Smash 4 controller is the only controller that you can buy brand new. Well, that's not entirely the case. So I suppose that after the GameCube lost all of its steam in Japan and the Wii was coming out, I guess they kept making the GameCube controllers because this one is pretty much intended for Wii. It's still got the same plug for GameCube, but it looks like they just kept the logo and just kept selling these in Japan, whereas they just kind of didn't in North America, which is a little annoying. Now, when they started selling these guys worldwide, they stopped selling and making these guys. So at one point I was able to get this thing for 40 bucks. I bought another one recently because I just wanted to have a brand new GameCube controller unopened, and that was $80. So maybe if you can find these things online for a cheap price, I'd definitely look into getting them if you're a die-hard GameCube collector. There's still some issues with this guy, just like this one, but it's not in how the buttons feel identical, so it feels like an original mold. It's just some of these controllers, quality-wise, don't seem to work as well. This one in particular, maybe it's just me, but I've had issues with the thumbstick. Now, obviously, you're not going to probably go out and buy an $80 controller, but I thought I'd just list it as an option. It is a nice, interesting way of getting a brand new GameCube controller that's not, $130, $150, but feels exactly like the original mold, because I assume it is the original mold. Now let's take a look at probably one of my favorite controllers of all time, the GameCube Wavebird controller. This is a wireless controller. Unfortunately, you cannot buy these new anymore. You have to buy them used. And when you buy them, you have to look for the adapter. You can use any old adapter from any of the other controllers. It doesn't have to be controller specific. It's not like you have to buy the one that came with the controller. You can buy any adapter. You just need to set the frequency on the bottom here and on the controller as well. Generally speaking, it's really comfortable. Battery life is pretty good, but what I've noticed is that a lot of these receivers seem to kind of die. I have two right now, and they're both glitching out. Maybe it's just my setup, but it is a little bit frustrating that I'm going to have to find another one now. The controller works fine, just that the receiver is the more expensive one. You can get these guys for anywhere between $40 to $60 for a good one, I'd say. Any cheaper, and you're probably either not getting an adapter or one of them doesn't work too well. But the Wavebird is a nice and pretty much the only wireless alternative for playing your Dolphin games with a GameCube controller. You can get third-party wireless controllers, but a lot of them are terrible, like the one from Mad Catz. That's god-awful. It also doesn't have rumble. That's something to note. But generally speaking, you really can't go wrong with either of these. Just make sure when you get this guy that you get it from a reputable seller. So if you want to check out a more in-depth video on these controllers, I've done a video on them a few months ago. You can check it out in the description. But you might be thinking, Jake, how do I hook all this stuff up to my computer? And here's how. This is the Smash 4 adapter that was released for Wii U. This is how you were able to play with your GameCube controllers on your Wii U. Now, this is only compatible on the Wii U with Smash 4, but you can hook this up to your PC, and there's two types of drivers you can install with it. The first one is a simple X input driver. Basically, it reads your GameCube controllers as an X input device, and you can play it with the general majority of games on PC. The only problem is that you have less buttons because, hey, it is a GameCube controller. It came out in a time where Nintendo apparently didn't want a lot of extra buttons on their controller, even though their competitors were doing it. The second driver that you can use is injected via a program called Zadig. If you use that driver with Zadig, you can only use this thing with Dolphin, but let me tell you, the emulation accuracy with this thing is perfect. A lot of other third-party adapters online have problems with ghosting and are just generally inaccurate, but according to Dolphin's blog update they did a couple months ago before 5.0, this thing is actually perfectly emulating how a GameCube controller is recognized by the original GameCube. It's one-for-one perfect emulation. Another nice thing is that it supports a lot of the original accessories because of those plugs. It also supports rumble and hot swapping. Now, one thing I won't get into too much detail about is the GameCube to Game Boy Advance link cable, and simply put, it just doesn't work with this adapter. It's not really a surprise to me. To some it might be, but you can use the Visual Boy Advanced emulator with the Dolphin emulator if you want to play those Game Boy Advanced GameCube titles. There is a reason why that it won't work with this thing or Dolphin right now, but it's just, I don't want to make this video 20 minutes longer than it needs to be, so I'm just going to leave it at that. It does not work with the GameCube to Game Boy Advance link cable. Let's go back to Wii for a second. Here we have the Dolphin bar from Mayflash. This is a really cool piece of tech, and up until this came out, I really didn't have a way to play the majority of Wii titles on my PC. For starters, it's got a nice stand here. You can remove that and have it like the original, or you can just have it stand up. Plastic doesn't feel necessarily cheap. This has fallen off the TV multiple times. My fault, because my TV isn't angled properly for something like this. But it sits up there right most of the time and hasn't broken on me yet, so it's nice that it's not some cheap piece of plastic. It's got a sync button right here, and it's got several modes available. So not only can you hook up your Wii to Dolphin and play that way, but you can also use your Wiimote as a mouse, which is really interesting. You also have a switch on the back here for the placement of this thing, so you can either have it on the top of the TV or on the bottom slightly below the TV. I always choose top. I highly recommend that. My one problem is that you're going to want to be careful when you have this thing hooked up, because I noticed that when I hook this thing up, a lot of my X-input devices just lock up and don't work. It's kind of recognized by a lot of games as a controller in and of itself. So when you want to, switch back to your regular games, make sure to unplug this thing first, because otherwise they might not work. Same kind of thing with Dolphin. If you try to use your GameCube controllers, I've noticed that there's some issue. It just registers this thing first. Lastly, let's look at some classic controllers today. Yeah, it's kind of weird saying that now. That was Nintendo's marketing phrase. So basically, for a lot of games that didn't support GameCube controllers, but you still wanted to use a controller instead of a Wiimote, Nintendo developed a lot of controller alternatives for it. And two of the best ones that I've come across are right in front of us here. Now you can get two different variants of this guy. One right here is the Classic Controller Pro, and then there's the regular Classic Controller. And all that one really is just the handles here kind of stripped out, and they took the ZL and ZR buttons and they moved them towards the middle on the top here. But I highly recommend tracking down this one, because it is probably the most comfortable controller I've ever held. There's just so much space on this thing, so it'll fit a variety of hand sizes, whether you have tiny girly boy hands like me or giant candy corn finger monster hands. It's an incredibly comfortable controller, especially for playing classic games. So if you have some kind of adapter you want to hook up to this thing to your PC, I highly recommend getting this thing, because the D-pad's good, the button placement's good, just for classic 4-button games or even like SNES games. It's kind of what it was designed for the Virtual Console. The sticks are a little higher than I like. You can't click them. Of course, the triggers are not analog, because that was just a thing with the Wii. But overall, considering the price, it is quite a fantastic controller. Incredibly comfortable, very ergonomic, great for classic gaming. Alright, because I literally cannot stop talking about it, let's get right back into it. The GameCube controller, the final one we have for you today. Although technically it's not. It's one of these classic controllers that has the look of a GameCube. So this is from Hori, and it's basically a recreation of the original GameCube controller in a way. It's got extra buttons too, so if you still miss the feel of a GameCube controller, but you want to play your classic controller games, but you realize like, oh crap, I don't have all the buttons on my GameCube controller to play this, well, there you go, now you can. Of course, with native Wii support and of course native Dolphin support, it's kind of nice. Pretty simple, plug in and play. Great solution for it. It's a lot different though than the typical GameCube controller. Obviously you have the different buttons here. The buttons at the top being digital. And you have an extra button on the top here, and as well as the plus and minus buttons. Also you got levels of turbo. But D-pad's a lot better, a lot different. C-stick, I gotta say, feels a little cheaper. And the control stick feels a little slipperier. Not that it slips off my thumb, but it's a little bit quicker. Like, there's Vaseline inside it. It's going, like, really fast. So, it's interesting. I'd say if you're a really competitive Smash player, whatever the fighting games the kids are into, I wouldn't go between this and a regular GameCube controller, because it'll obviously feel different and possibly mess you up on your timing. But for casual play, it is a really great solution if you're hurting and you don't have the ports on your PC for GameCube controller, but you have a Wiimote lying around. Well, there you go. It's an overall really nice piece of equipment. For 25 bucks, you can get various colors. There's the Luigi one, there's also a Mario one, a Peach one, a bunch of other ones that they've been releasing. And they kind of released this just for Smash 4, but I find myself using this for a bunch of other games. It's quite nice. Anyway guys, I hope you found this video helpful. I'll see you next time. I'm out.